Welcome to the Dojo, the podcast where we turn marketing news into marketing tasks. This week we'll hear 3 stories, including one from our special guest. We'll pick the best one and turn them into tasks that you can complete today to improve your marketing and get better money for your business. I'm Dale.
I'm Jess.
I'm Tim.
And welcome to the Dojo. And this week we're joined by a very special guest indeed. We're joined by Andy Tuxford, our head of SEO. Hi, Andy.
Hi, Dale. So I'm Andy. For those of you that haven't seen me before, I've been on a few podcasts. For those of you that haven't seen me before, I'm the head of SEO at Exposure Ninja. I've been working in SEO now for too many years, about 8-9 years now, I think it is. Mainly at Exposure Ninja.
And it's great to have you. I'm sure your introduction was perfect, but probably wasn't as high in praise for yourself as I could be, because I think you're a terrific SEO, and I think our clients are incredibly fortunate to have you running our SEO team. But that's not what we're here for today. We're actually here to hear some stories. So I'm going to ask each of you to share your story. But first, let's hear what your title of it is. Jess.
So mine is all about how privacy is growing tighter and a cookieless future looms. What can marketers do to prepare?
Andy, what's your story this week?
Mine is DMA is only 1 month away, well, slightly less than 1 month now. So you need to take action now or potentially lose your data.
Dun, dun, dun. And Tim, what's your story for this week?
I wanted to talk about Pinterest's announcement of their new Google Ads integration and what this could mean for marketers, particularly e-commerce.
Spectacular. Well, I'm kind of scared now by Andy's story, so I'm going to have to pick you first, Andy. Tell us more about that one.
Okay, so for those of you that haven't heard about it, the DMA, or the Digital Markets Act, is some new legislation by the EU, which is coming into effect on the 6th of March 2024. So not too far away. So obviously, with it being the EU, it only affects businesses that operate in the EU and the UK. But how it's working, where you may not have heard it, is it doesn't directly impact the vast majority of businesses. What it impacts is what is known as gatekeepers, which the EU have designated gatekeepers, which are big internet platforms that essentially are so big that they are required almost to use the internet. So the ones impacted are Alphabet, who are the owners of Google, Amazon, Apple, ByteDance, who own TikTok, Meta, and Microsoft. So what it actually means is what's coming in is it's almost an extension of GDPR. So what it is it's a lot of legislation that's coming in on these businesses that basically mean they need to play fair on the internet. They're not allowed to favor themselves. They've got to treat people equally. They're not allowed to block you from seeing competitors or uninstalling things like that. But one of the big things, and the big thing that will impact you as a business is, and I want to get this right, make sure I get the wording absolutely right. So there's a big list of do's and don'ts, what they can and can't do. And one of the don'ts is specifically they cannot track end users outside of the gatekeeper's core platform service for the purpose of targeted advertising without effective consent having been granted. So that's quite a mouthful. But essentially what it means is they are not allowed to manage data that tracks users unless that user has specifically given consent. So if you're familiar with GDPR, which hopefully you should be if you're managing a website online, you might be thinking, well, how's that different from GDPR? Because GDPR means you can't track users unless they give consent. The difference being, now these platforms are responsible for it. They cannot process data that is not GDPR compliant. Whereas GDPR, it's the website that is accountable because they're the ones tracking the data and they're the ones using the data. It's just passing through these platforms. Now, these platforms can't process the data. They have a responsibility to make sure people aren't using their platforms in a non-GDPR compliant manner. So if you're not GDPR compliant, that means your data can't pass through them, or they have a liability if it does. These platforms definitely aren't going to want these kind of liabilities. Because it's an indirect impact, we don't know exactly what they're going to do. I would say it's a pretty fair bet that if you are not GDPR compliant, they're just going to turn you off on like ads, analytics platforms. They're just going to basically stop and disappear. So that's why it's a big thing, because obviously marketing, you need your data. You can't market effectively without analytics. You can't run AdWords without Google Ads. You can't run your Google Ads without AdWords. So yeah, you absolutely got to make sure you are compliant. If you are not compliant and not managing it effectively, then that data could disappear and those accounts could get blocked and disappear, and then you're going to have real problems.
There's not anybody getting their hands on my data. No way. I'm sorry. That stuff is way too precious for me, as Jess will be able to attest. I'm kind of wondering about like business owners and marketing managers, what they may be thinking after hearing this quite significant news. They're going to have to do something about it. What would you suggest? Like, what's the starting point for it?
Yeah. So if you're outside the EU and you don't have any customers from the EU, you don't need to worry about it because it's EU legislation. So specifically, though, it is if you have traffic to your website from the EU, you are liable. The way the EU have written the legislation is it applies to the personal data of any EU or UK citizen. So if you're an EU or UK citizen, you go to an American website, that website has to comply by that legislation with your data. So if you get traffic from the EU or UK, it applies to you. If you don't, you can ignore it. If you are 100% you are GDPR compliant, you can ignore it. Now, I say 100%, make sure you are sure, because it is very rare that I find a website that is actually properly GDPR compliant. It is rarer than you would imagine. Most of them, it's little minor things. It's not major. They're not going to be getting fines from the Information Commission's office and things like that. They might just get a letter saying, oh, tweak this or change this, but they're not actually compliant. So keep an eye on that. So the way to manage it is you need to make sure that none of your data is going to these platforms unless a user has specifically consented to say it can go. So that can be managed manually, which is a bit of a pain and is very resource heavy and is going to be very difficult to manage. The easiest way, and the way I'd advise to do it, by far the easiest way, is to use something called a CMP, or a consent management platform. So there's a few ones out there, and the way they work is basically they take care of your cookies all for you. You get an account with them, they scan your website, they tell you all the cookies that are on your website, or what they do, who they do them for, gives you a big long list and gives you a nice cookie consent banner. Most of them have multiple options, so you can choose your style, etc. You drop it on your website and it just manages all your cookies, or your tracking cookies for you. Well, the best part about these is they integrate with analytics and through Tag Manager. So if you're familiar with Google Tag Manager, there's a new mode in that called consent mode that Google have made, which integrates these platforms into it. So what it does is it stops your tags from gathering data that they're not allowed to gather based on the user's cookie consent status. And it adjusts the data it gathers based on their exact cookie consent status. So if they accept some cookies but not others, it will adjust what data it gathers. Where they really have an advantage, in my opinion, over doing it manually, is if you do it manually, you've basically got to block everything. If they don't consent to cookies, you've basically got to block it. You get no data, which is terrible from a marketing perspective. The way these CMPs work is they anonymize the data. So even if they've not accepted cookies, you still get some data through because it's just anonymized, takes out all the personal data. So it's still GDPR compliant, but you still get some data. So it maximizes your data quality whilst remaining GDPR compliant, which is what every marketer wants.
Yeah, absolutely. Jess, I'm not going to come to you on this one because you're just going to mock me in my use of, my love for data. So, Tim, I'm really curious what you're thinking of in terms of a business owner, because you, of course, over the years, have spoken many times to business owners, marketing directors about GDPR. How do you think business owners are going to be thinking and feeling about this one?
I've got a feeling it's one of those things that people just aren't going to be aware of, and most websites aren't going to have a plan for this. And it's just, they're going to be hearing it now for the first time, despite the fact that this legislation is a year old, maybe more.
6 months. So
okay,
yeah, it'll be 6 months on the 6th of March because they have a 6-month window to implement. The 6th of March is when it comes in. So
yeah, I mean the potential fines for these gatekeepers are like 10% of annual revenue, which is going to be tens of billions of dollars for some of these firms. So I can't believe that this is going to be the sort of thing that they're just going to ease in gently. This seems like it will be a hard deadline. I think, I don't know, my opinion as a consumer is this is, it's more sort of cookie pop-up type stuff, which has basically just been a massive annoyance. I don't know how many. I'd love to see the heat map stats on people clicking just mindlessly accept on all the cookie pop-ups, and whether people actually consider that to be a benefit to their privacy over the annoyance of having to remove all these pop-ups when they land on a website. But I think on the other hand, there are parts of the DMA that do make a lot of sense for consumers and will lead to greater choice. And this is it's a much larger piece of legislation than just the sort of the cookie side of things, which I think on the whole is probably positive. But certainly this piece feels like an annoyance, and I expect it will feel like an annoyance for a lot of website owners.
Yeah. No, I would agree. It's a good thing. It's an ethical thing to do in order to make sure that people have their privacy and the kind of data handled in the best way. But yeah, sure, certainly isn't going to come with a bit of time necessarily dedicated to getting this all sorted out if they haven't already. Jess, how do you feel about this? Would you rather deep dive into it or keep it at a bit of a distance?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, isn't it, where you can see where the benefit is for consumers, but at the same time, I always like to see this from the consumer point of view. And part of me likes getting targeted ads, and likes getting information that's relevant to me. Like, I wanted to get some new gym wear, so all I have to do is go on Gymshark, and then I get everybody advertising to me. I've got so many different gym leggings to choose from, all totally too expensive, and I can't believe they charge that much. But at least I've got options. And I mean, when I go on websites, when that cookie thing pops up, I'm like, do I really want these folks chasing me around the internet? And then if I don't, I'll say no. And if I'm not fussed, then I'll say yes. Because sometimes I do actually want that little reminder. You know, I'm forgetful. I am the consumer that forgets stuff and needs remarketing to. So from a consumer perspective, I definitely see the benefits. But I can also see that actually I think in the end, we're all going to end up with really irrelevant adverts and we're going to get really annoyed by it. I think we need to find a middle ground so that when I mention a brand, I don't suddenly get out for it. That's a bit strange. But at the same time, I don't want everything to be totally irrelevant to me.
Yeah. What about maybe we should start a new browser and a new ad platform which either pays you to use it or gives you a discount on all the purchases that you make by collecting maximum amounts of data. So you have to fill in a questionnaire about your usage habits. You have to tell it what you like. You have to give it so much data. You know, you could hook up access to your emails, but in return, you get your products cheaper because we're able to laser target you with ads much more effectively than anyone else can in this post-cookie world.
I would actually love that.
New business plan. Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking we should call it Exposure Ninjanet. That's my plan. But yeah, I think a lot of people would appreciate that. And Dale, sorry, you were just saying that you would actually really enjoy a really targeted experience. Like, please share.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm like you. I'll look for an item and then, part of me kind of hopes that I'm going to get other suggestions. And those other suggestions tend to come in completely different platforms. So I'll be on Google and I'll search for products and I'll look at a shopping ad more than likely because there's that image, the visual, and I'll be drawn to it. I'll go onto the website and then I'll be on Instagram the following day and I'll get a similar suggestion because I've been over there onto the website. People are blah, 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 blah. I actually really love that because it makes me shop around a bit more. It helps me develop a better sense of well, wait, I'm comparing this against that without even getting to that part in the funnel of, well, let me start to compare. I'm going to make a list of all the similar products. I'm going to choose which one best, depending on which has the best features, which one costs me less, which one has the shipping thing. To have suggestions come up to me makes my life a lot easier. I like when I open Google's discovery on my phone and it says, do you want to look at this item? Because it knows I've looked at similar ones. I actually really like that because otherwise I'm not going to know about it. I bought a camera recently because I looked at something similar. I looked on one website for this camera and then Instagram said, hey, you might like this really hipstery camera. And I bought it and it turns out it's terrible. But it looks great. The targeting really, really helps. So I'm a big fan. And it does. And Tim's point about have a website or a browser where you can just sign off and say, target me as much as you want. Reminds me that just recently I read that there's a brand new thing called the Enhanced Games, which is the Olympics with steroid usage and all that kind of stuff. I don't know, it has nothing to do with marketing, but it just popped in my brain that somebody's finally decided that, do you know what, we should see how fast people can run by filling up the eyeballs with enhancements and stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, let's see how much pressure the human leg bone can take. Let's see how low we could get CPA on Jess's leggings if we knew everything about that, if we knew everything about Jess and all of her preferences.
Absolutely. There was one browser called Brave, which did, I think, I don't know how it works, but there was a payment kind of system where it would, instead of showing you ads, it would pay publishers for having people visit their websites and stuff like that. The problem is people don't, they have to go out there and choose that. They have to go and choose that experience. Whereas what people actually want is just to be shown it, because that's part of what we're used to. And changing that is kind of breaking how people shop in a way. I don't know. It's been 30, 40 years of the internet. We're pretty used to ads, and we're not that opposed to them now, especially the better targeting, that there has been over the years. I think making them worse is just going to annoy people. So as Jess said. Speaking of Jess, it'd be great to know what your story is this week. Tell us more about yours.
Mine's actually so related to Andy's, so apologies for that. But I suppose it kind of talks about it on a more... It's not just talking about the one legislation. It ties in very nicely. So actually, thank you, Andy, for including that. So we're getting... Well, I feel like this gets brought up every year, and I go, oh, we're getting closer and closer to no cookies. And then Google's like, actually, we're going to extend. We haven't decided yet. We're just going to extend. But the plan is that they want to get rid of third-party cookies. That doesn't mean that they'll be getting rid of their own, may I just add. So you'll be golden if you're using Google Ads or that kind of thing. Anything in their network, YouTube, all that stuff, you're going to be having a great time. But it could potentially restrict you if you're collecting data on your website about your audience in order to make informed decisions, to check that your target audience is actually coming to your website, which can sometimes happen. But realistically, I think what marketers need to be doing is finding ways to get first-party data where you can, so not just relying on analytics and all these other places where you're grabbing cookies from. So you can do this, especially via your mailing list. This is absolutely fab. And you can get people on said mailing list with things like genuinely helpful ebooks, tools, or just having a really, really great newsletter. And you can use that newsletter to learn a bit more about them. So we have a client who we recently did some really exciting email work where we basically sent them a couple of introductory emails and sent them another email where it was like, are you this type of person, or this type of person? And then that helped us find out a little bit more information about them. And then we could send them really targeted emails so that they're not just getting emails that just are irrelevant to them and they're having to filter through them to get to the stuff they want. They're actually getting the information that they like. And this was based around skill level as well. And because of that, you really wanted to send them, some very specific information, and that's why it just makes your life so much easier to have first party information. You can also make use of things like basket abandonment or browse abandonment for your PPC, so you can sort of have a bit of that data, and also Google, Meta, Microsoft and all those folks already have a lot of data themselves that they've got about their own users, so you can kind of run your ads in those spaces. I'm not sponsored, just saying, but you can run your ads in those spaces based on the data they have about their users. It's just going to make things like retargeting more challenging, which is why you kind of want to capture them with that email sign up as soon as you can. And you also will need to pay more attention to the places that your audience are actually spending their time, whether that's advertising on certain websites. Like if you know your audience spends loads of time on Reddit, for instance, discussing products like yours, you may want to actually invest in Reddit ads, but you might find that they read loads, so you want to go for digital PR, or maybe they spend all their time on social media and TikTok, so you want to be on TikTok. So there are definitely a lot of places that you can put yourself and ways around this. That means that you're not just going to be left in the dark, but you need to start prepping now. You can't just wait till the cookies are gone and then just be like, oh wait, we don't have any emails and we were just contacting everybody via ads. So that's my story.
Awesome.
Discuss.
Tim, you advocate for email collection, email automation and stuff like that. What kind of opportunities do you see in here when it comes to gathering this first party data. And then, with our own free marketing review, which you can get by going to exposureninja.com/review, and we'll review your website and your marketing and see which opportunities you have to get the very best out of your marketing. So exposureninja.com/review. Tim, we've been gathering that kind of information, first party data, figuring out where people are coming from. What kind of opportunities do you see most of the time that people are missing? Is it this question of where did you come from, or is there something else to it?
I think, to be honest, a lot of websites just aren't really set up for picking up emails that aren't direct inquiries, and I think that's a huge opportunity. We've seen, you'll often see a blog that generates huge volumes of traffic, and I don't just mean a blog post, I mean an entire blog section on the website that generates the vast majority of the organic traffic to that site, and yet the only calls to action are commercial: inquire now, make a booking, whatever. And if you think about the intent and the user journey, that likelihood is that if people are looking for information, they're not going to be ready to book now or buy now or whatever. But there's no sort of secondary CTA which has a lower commitment bait for people to get that data. So I hope this is going to force more people to think about that type of thing. But I also think this might not change that much. Meta, I think people don't really give Zuck and Meta enough credit around this, but when iOS 14 came out, and people don't give Zuck any credit at all, he's basically a pantomime villain. But when iOS 14 came out, there was the predicted death of Facebook's ad revenue was sort of universal. This is it. You won't be able to track conversions, all of that stuff. And with the AI sort of modeling that they've produced, actually, I don't think many advertisers have really felt a long-term effect at all. And whilst Meta's ad revenue took a dip in 2022, it's way back up again in 2023. So I feel like this is something where AI modeling is going to help sort of fill in some of the gaps that the advertisers and marketers have without these third-party cookies. But honestly, also, I don't know how Google's going to even enforce this end to third-party cookies. I know they want to force people into the privacy sandbox, but if we think about what the DMA, the Digital Markets Act that Andy's been talking about, that's their design to not give a platform an unfair competitive advantage. And that's exactly what Google is trying to do with their privacy sandbox, where they can benefit from all that tracking data, but they can then regulate and decide which other cookies to exclude. I can't see how those two things are consistent. This seems completely inconsistent to me, but that's one for the CMA to sort out.
Do you know what? I can't help but think that the topic of privacy and data collection and all that kind of stuff must feel pretty boring for many people, like many marketers and many business owners. So I wouldn't mind kind of looking for the fun element of it. So Andy, I'd like to come to ask you a little bit more before we come to Tim's story, which was, I feel, maybe related to all of this. But what are the kind of like fun, exciting parts of data collection and tracking, and all this kind of stuff that marketers can not only look forward to be doing, but also, and more importantly, gain something from? Like what can they do that's fun and is going to increase their traffic, increase their leads, increase their rankings, and so on?
I'm not sure I'd describe it as fun. It's not fun for most people, I don't think. I'm not sure how you classify it as fun, but what can they do as fun to improve their rankings and get better data? I think the best way to get better data is you've got to give them a reason to give you your data. More and more users are rejecting cookies. You can see it in the data. You get those blank spots where people are rejecting the cookies, are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And like just saying, cookieless future is coming. It's coming at some point, because, well, at some point, if it keeps on going the way it is, there's just going to be nobody accepting cookies. So it's so you've got to give them a reason to give that data to you. And I think some of it's overcoming misconceptions. I mean, a lot of people, when you start talking about privacy and tracking, companies get some mental images of marketers in dingy rooms, like, oh, John Smith was on this website for 20 minutes, and it's like they're literally following a person around the internet. it doesn't work like that. It's all about trends and groups and everything, and the marketers don't get the individual information. It's all aggregated and so on. But you've got to give them a reason, to something that they want to interact with. And the way the legislation is being written, you've got to give them, it's got to have a reason for them to give. You can't just say, we'll give you this in exchange for your data. There's got to be a reason for them giving you your data. You can't sort of bribe them into it, like, oh, give us your data and we'll give you a £5 discount or something like that. That's, you're not allowed to do that. You've got to, if they share their data with you, there's got to be for a reason. So you need to find something that, some way of interacting with them that they are going to want, that also means they share their data with you.
I'm curious, Tim and Jess, what kind of ideas you have of convincing people to want to be cookied or to want to be tracked that aren't necessarily like the typical ways that we would do it, like ebooks and things like that.
I've got to say, the question that you just asked Andy was probably the most difficult question in the history of podcasting.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Andy. I truly am.
Fair play, Andy. You started that out well.
Absolutely. Yeah, fair play.
I don't know. I think there are some opportunities around things like, I mean, scorecards have been around for ages, but, since the early days of I was going to say that the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal showed how willing people are to give their personal data in return for some scorecard, which gave them some, which
how did you do that?
Or whatever. And I think opportunities for things like scorecards, where you're offering people a playful way to share info with you, could be a nice way to go. Whether this is, find your perfect skincare routine from the Ordinary website or whatever, really. I think, maybe something around that. I think if we trust capitalism and we trust entrepreneurship, we marketers will develop new and exciting ways to capture people's first party data in ways that are today inconceivable, and then in 5-10 years time we'll be having exactly the same conversation once the EU have decided to clamp down on those new ways because they're too effective. So I believe in us.
Yeah. You advertisers and marketers with a goal. Yeah, don't mess with them. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jess, you have any ideas of things that businesses and marketers can do in order to kind of gain that trust that people want to be tracked in any way?
Yeah. I mean, I have an example, and something as well that made me think a bit was how Tim said about like how Meta has so much data. Like, people run to Facebook to share their brand new life event, or to share like everything that's going on with them, their health problems, what they did today, what they ate for dinner. Like, they have so much information. I just thought that was really interesting because they've like turned it into like a fun little thing to share with people. But the business that I was thinking about when you were saying about making it fun is, and this is also partially because I really want a dog, but I can't have a dog, so I'm just going through the motions of planning one because that also brings enjoyment. But the Purina website, they sell pet food, and they have a quiz on their website which is like, what kind of dog is right for you? And they ask you all these questions about like your lifestyle and what you do for your job and how long are you out of the house. So they find out like all this information about you and like how much do you like walking and all these things. And technically they could use that info to then serve you up things on the website, which is essentially what they do, right? At the end of the quiz, they'll be like, you need a corgi. And I'm like, amazing. Love that. I want one of those right now. And then they'll give you a load of links being like, if this is the dog for you, you need to read this guide. You need to join this mailing list for people who like dogs with short legs or herding dogs or whatever, and on a lot of their blogs as well, they will have first days bringing your new puppy home. And then there'll be CTA of join our mailing list specifically for people who just got a puppy. Or they will have another mailing list if you're talking about like, how can I teach my senior dog to do a new trick when it's old? And they'll have a blog about that. And then at the end they'll say, here's our mailing list for senior dog owners. And then they send you all this stuff. So I think like, as much as that's not necessarily making the data collection fun, it is also a fun way to engage your audience and find out loads of information about them that really benefits them, but also can benefit you in the long run when they next visit your site. So
it's absolutely fascinating when you think about how it all kind of comes full circle, where it always comes back to email. Like, if you can convince people to fill out a quiz, and then at the end you say, well, there's more information to be shared. Here's your daily guide. Like, I think you and I have talked about this, choosing a dog before, and how after you make a choice of the dog, they then email you, okay, here's your email about day one, what to do. We're going to send you these. The same for like Pampers, huge company. They have similar stuff where you do a quiz, or, one of these parenting websites, they say you fill it in and you want to understand like which part of the pregnancy you're at, or which part of the after pregnancy you're at, after the birth. And they send you like, you just started week 7 of your new life with a baby and stuff like that. Here's the things you need to know. That creates an opportunity to get people through to the site, and then pop the cookie on or whatever, which I absolutely love. But I think before we do come to Tim's story, I have one thing that we're all kind of semi-addressing, and that's the one thing that can convince people to pick your website and accept cookies and data tracking, all that kind of stuff, whichever method it is, whether it's through like opt-ins and mailing lists and whatever, is brand. So if you have a really strong brand and you make people love what you do, whether that's through any of the different channels or social media networks or through search or through video, whatever, you're slowly capturing people at the beginning of the funnel, end of the funnel, and they're getting used to the idea of your brand being really, really good or really knowledgeable or whatever at the thing that you sell or they sell or whatever. Like, and when we keep coming back to brand because of SGE is coming up, this search generative experience is going to change how people use the web. Brand is going to be a big part of that. You're not going to see brands referenced in the same way. You're going to see a list of products you might choose, and you think, oh, I don't recognize that brand, but I do recognize that one. I'll pick that one. I'll learn more about that one. I'll probably buy it. If you can enhance how your brand is kind of distributed and covered and spoken about, the sentiment, all that kind of stuff, people will navigate and happily be opted into any of your marketing, or in whichever form that is, because they've built up a positive sentiment about it. Tim, I'd love to know more about your story, because I think you were saying something about Pinterest ads, and this seems to be the ads podcast. Let's hear more about that one.
So Pinterest had their earnings statement, and their earnings missed expectations and their stock dropped, but then the CEO busted out some news about a new Google ad integration and their stock went right back up. So it's the early days of this. We haven't had a play with it yet. We don't know what it's actually going to be like on a day-to-day basis, but the announcement is basically that Pinterest is going to allow advertisers to advertise on Pinterest through Google Ads. So they're integrating Google Ads with Pinterest. I think this is really exciting for a couple of reasons. Firstly, Pinterest has never been so popular. For a lot of people, it's just not on their sort of daily radar at all, but it's got almost 500,000 monthly active users, which puts it at a similar-ish sort of size to X, formerly Twitter. And what?
Sorry, I didn't mean to catch you off straight there, but how many people?
498 million monthly active users.
Blimey, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think the most interesting thing about those users from a marketer's perspective is that there's always been quite a lot of commercial intent with Pinterest. If you've ever had organic traffic coming from Pinterest, you tend to find it converts quite well because people are often looking at products, right? They're looking at things to buy, they're looking for inspiration. So I think this integration, we don't know how great it's going to be, but let's say, for example, that you're running shopping ads against, cushions, and you're showing up in a feed of people who are looking at cushions, and like it's managed to work out that here are the cushions in this picture and here's your cushion ad. That is amazing, right? Because that kind of in context shopping-ish behavior and then just putting a shopping ad straight there could be super highly targeted, potentially more highly targeted than regular Google shopping ads in the SERP. So I think this is really interesting. They've had a similar sort of thing with Amazon, and they haven't shared, or not that I can find, they haven't shared too much data about the ROI of this, but Pinterest is using this to try and monetize their non-US visitors better. because they don't tend to make too much revenue from those non-US visitors. I think they're averaging around sort of $1.25 per user on average per year, which is obviously super low. So if this Google ad integration can help them monetize those users a bit better, then it's going to really help Pinterest visibility. But I think this is really exciting, or potentially really exciting, for e-commerce marketers, particularly for very visual products where they know their audience is spending time on Pinterest. So yeah, looking forward to seeing how this goes.
Absolutely fascinating. Jess, are you much of a Pinterest user yourself?
Yeah, I really am. The whole time it's really interesting to see all of your reactions when you're like, Pinterest? Who uses Pinterest? And I can tell you that my mum uses Pinterest, I use Pinterest, and all three of my little sisters, the youngest who is 14, use Pinterest for all different things, And I remember when I was like to my little sister, I was like, when you go to the nail bar, like, how do you know what nails you want? And she was like, Pinterest. And I was like, you use Pinterest? And I just thought that was really interesting. And also, I don't know if any of you are Pinterest users yourselves, but now when you are looking at, like, let's say you're looking for house inspiration, you'll open up an image and you can click different parts of that image and it will take you to a product. So they're already using these really cool capabilities. And I'm much more likely to search, if I want an image for something, so much more likely to search on Pinterest. Especially, like, as an artist, I look for all my art references on Pinterest. Very rarely do I use Google Images. So I think Google are probably finding that maybe they're seeing less people visiting Google Images or less people making purchases for Google Images. Have noticed that loads of people buy from images on Pinterest and are like, we can just connect here. So yeah, I think that's really, really cool. I think there's a huge audience there, and I think that, yeah, it could be massive. Really cool.
I've got a stat for you on Pinterest demographics. So 70, this is from a featured snippet on Google, so source not verified. 72.6% of female respondents in the UK said they were Pinterest users, compared to 21.7% of males. So this is I don't know if there's any other social networks that have such a split like that. That is really wild.
Andy, are you a Pinterest user?
I am not, so no, don't use it. But it just struck me as Tim and Jess were talking there. What I think could be really interesting here is seeing how this integrates with Gemini. So I know in terms of how you see, I don't know how much you've seen of it, in terms of Google launching their Gemini, their latest, at least the latest that I saw video in terms of how it used. It's using a lot of visual search and using a lot of, find me this or change this, and it finds things for you. With Pinterest being a very visual platform, it'd be interesting to see with that on the horizon with Google, and then this announcement is making me a bit suspicious that there's possibly some kind of integration coming there from them.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see. And there's one part I'm thinking about from the SEO element of Pinterest. I'm sure you remember a time where a load of the first 10 results on on Google search were like Pinterest results before Google brought in their kind of limit of 2 links per website, a couple of years ago. Like, I remember 5, maybe 10 years ago, it'd be just Pinterest as a result for everything. Is Pinterest as a website for off-page SEO something that you consider when looking through our clients' campaigns, for example?
Not too often. You don't tend to see it as much anymore in organic search. It tends to not be a big factor. It still pops up in some things. Tends to be businesses with no web presence themselves. If things relate, they tends to. Well, you also tend to get you get their Facebook profiles and so on all linked over, and they've not really got any web presence themselves, or something's gone horribly wrong in their SEO and they've disappeared. But you don't tend to see it too much in organic anymore. But I remember exactly what you mean, Dale, when you're saying about it. It wasn't all that long ago when you'd search for something and you'd literally get 5 pages of Pinterest on page 1, and so yeah, I think the what was it called? The diversity update was the name of it, wasn't it? Where they where they limited it to well, you still get more sometimes, but it's pretty much 1, maybe 2 if you're lucky in the result. Kind of, I suspect that kind of did Pinterest a little bit and really harmed their organic traffic that they were getting.
It must have been really interesting to be in the SEO team at Pinterest during all of that. You're at the top of it. You're just like, you should see how much traffic we're getting from search. You must be like absolute champions. And suddenly, almost overnight, it's all gone. Oh dear. I think that perhaps maybe the way to look at Pinterest is that if you're running, if you're an e-com or you're selling something that is applicable to those kind of adverts, that you know, where your customer is likely to be using Pinterest, that you can use your Google Ads and just push them a bit further into that, into that market as well. Makes, complete practical sense. You got literally nothing to use by just expanding it. Okay, you're going to be paying more, but you'll probably be reaching a better kind of customer anyway. But the other element for me is part of the funnel, just understanding, whilst you may not be getting people searching for this product, whatever it is, and seeing the search results, Pinterest is not going to be there. It may be earlier in the funnel that they're actually looking at Pinterest when they're doing their research. Like Andy, I know that it wasn't all that long ago that you were buying a kitchen and you were doing it all up and stuff. I imagine that Pinterest may have had like a part to play in the decisions on like how that looks. There are probably products that, like some of our e-commerce clients and, the people watching and listening to our podcast, they're selling something where the earliest stages of information or just inspiration are on Pinterest and not on, other pages. It may be on a mixture of the top 10 best designs for kitchens in 2024. That'll be on some home and leisure website. But it's going to be, people are going to be doing the same kind of searches on Pinterest as well. So you might as well capitalize on it and be there too. Excellent. Well, I'm going to choose a pick. It's really hard to pick the best story and to turn into tasks this week. I don't really decide. I don't know. Group, what are we feeling? Which story stands out the most?
DMA. You have to take action on it immediately, I think.
Fair. Okay, well, I hope you're prepared for the questions that come with it then. So, Tim, I'll start with you. What tasks can business owners take from Andy's story about the DMA coming in force on the 6th of March?
I think follow Andy's advice, sort yourself out with a consent management platform. All of this goes away for a low fee of $25 a month. You have to do this. There's no other option.
Yeah, because the alternative is a huge fine, and nobody wants to pay for that.
Well, black hole in your own data, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't take any decisions when you're marketing without data. That's what I'm going to say on that matter. Jess, what task can marketing managers take from this story?
The first task is to just not panic. You're not losing your data forever. And of course, as we said, it only impacts people who are either based in the EU/UK or who have customers from those locations. But I would also definitely suggest looking into how much you're actually doing to collect first-party data and then dial that up, basically, so that you are collecting your own data about the people that visit your website. And you can then use that to connect with them in a different way away from Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, ByteDance, Meta, and Microsoft.
MySpace, Vivo, the whole lot.
Yeah, all of them.
Excellent. Okay, well, Andy, I'm going to come to you now with a couple of quickfire questions, if you don't mind. Here we go. If you had just 1 hour to improve your marketing, what would you work on?
Probably social media marketing. It's probably the area that I know the least about as a marketer. So that's I'd spend my time there to sort of up my knowledge a bit on those areas. Areas, obviously multiple different types of social media. It's not just one thing. So multiple areas. Hour might not quite be enough, but I'd try and up my skills in those areas.
Great choice. What would you do with an infinite marketing budget?
Oh, infinite marketing budget. Everything. Infinite marketing budget, infinite marketing. If we assume it's an infinite marketing budget where it's not going to stay infinite, I would basically trial everything and see what got the best return. So when the infinite budget went away and it was a set budget again, I could push into that.
That's a superb suggestion. Best one yet, I think. Which marketing skill would you recommend that the 18-year-old Andy works on, and why?
That's tough. Well, because obviously my background's in SEO, but SEO's changed so much over the years. I would probably recommend him working on what sort of general marketing principles? So understanding general marketing principles, what makes people tick, because that's ultimately what marketing comes down to. You've got to work out what your customers want, what makes them tick, what's valuable to them, and offer them that. So I'd advise him to spend some more time learning about that, focusing on that.
I love that suggestion. That's superb. What are you most excited about in marketing right now?
It's probably been said a million times before, but at the moment, AI. I want to see what it does. I think it's got so much potential to do some really cool things. So I know there's a lot of controversy in certain industries around AI, and I get it. But I think from a marketing perspective, it's got so much potential.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Last one. Who should we invite onto the podcast next?
I'm going to nominate our head of accounts, Gemma. I think it'd be nice to get a generalized, more sort of top level marketing, all round understanding.
100% agree. Yes, let's get Gemma on. Let's just every time I'm going to insist each guest says Gemma until Gemma comes on. Well, that's superb. Andy, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your insights when it comes to not just the DMA stuff, but also SEO, because you've done some fantastic work when it comes to SEO for our clients over, over a long period of time. So thank you so much for sharing, and we hope that you'll come back on again in the future. Join us all next week, where we're going to be joined by another guest from probably our team as well. In the meantime, if you haven't already, you should hop over to exposureninja.com/review, request a free website marketing review of your business, and we'll let you know exactly what you can do to increase your marketing performance. Thanks again, and see you again next time. Bye.